that they're now leaderless, so somebody else will step in. But this is why Netanyahu's been right from day one, and Biden, Blinken, and Harris have been wrong from day one. They wanted a ceasefire right away. And so Sinwar's dead. Sinwar would not be dead, but for Netanyahu insisting that they go after Hamas. But the point is this. It's really Iran. In the end, they have to deal with Iran. And again, the same, what I call four stooges, and that would be Biden, Blinken, Harris, and Sullivan, are telling again Israel to pull back, don't hit their nuke sites, don't hit their oil fields. So everything you would do, logically, militarily, to really take it and strike at your enemy and push them back and even cause them to topple, this administration will not allow them to do. And this is a habit this administration has. When you think of Afghanistan, the price we paid for that surrender, the people in Ukraine, they were slow-walking weapons. You give them weapons to win, but they didn't do that either. And now in Israel case, a ceasefire means a surrender. So another day, the enemy builds up and they attack you. And it was pretty grotesque to watch Biden and Harris basically take a victory lap because Sinwar is dead. If they had had their way, Sinwar would be alive. Hamas would be fairly vibrant. And that's why I think Netanyahu is going to try and hold on as long as he can to Gaza, not to take Gaza, not to keep Gaza, but to clean it out and to try and find some way for the Israeli forces to have some say in what's going on there and to have some impact on the culture there, because it's all about terror and killing Jews and killing Americans, by the way.
Mark, given that scenario, can you play out for us how you think this proceeds, depending on the election here? Because, I mean, Blinken's talking about, we're going to redouble our efforts to end this conflict. And obviously the position of America is still to sort of smother Israel with its love, right? But what happens in terms of the election either way?
First of all, this administration talks out of both sides of its mouth. We have 30% of our Navy in and around the Mediterranean Sea, which is really just defending itself against the Houthis and so forth. And even in the last ballistic missile attack, 181 missiles were fired. 12 of our missiles were used to take out their missiles, which is very good. But I mean, we have a nuclear submarine sitting there. We've got all kinds of things sitting there. I'm not exactly clear why. And then when Israel says, we're going to go to Rafah. No, you can't go to Rafah, but they do. We're going to go into Lebanon to take out Hezbollah. No, you can't do that. And they're boycotting Israel. They're withholding an awful lot of weapons from Israel right now. They're running out of defensive missiles. And then when Israel says, OK, we've got Iran where we need it, we can actually cause this regime to topple. This administration is like a special pleader for Iran. Iran's gotten $200 billion, far more than Israel's gotten. And of course, they're building up their weapons and they're selling all to China. How do I see this? If Donald Trump wins, I see this playing out beautifully. I see Iran in deep trouble. They've been threatening to assassinate him, trying to assassinate him. I don't think he likes that very much. Netanyahu wants to take out that regime. I think Iran's in deep trouble. Conversely, God forbid, if Harris is elected, I think Iran says, oh, we've got plenty of life to live here, because Harris really hates Netanyahu. She's very hostile to the Jews in Israel. That's why she's very friendly with the mayor in Dearbornistan, Michigan. And I think that's going to be a huge, huge problem for Israel. So depending on how the election turns out, if Trump wins, I feel very confident that Israel will get the equipment it needs. It'll get the backing it needs. And Trump already said, go ahead and finish it, but finish it fast, because he doesn't like what he sees on TV, rightly, the civilians and so forth. But he's telling them, go ahead and finish it. I know that's his view. I've discussed it with him. But in the case of these ideologues, these eggheads, that's not the way they view it. They want to rearrange the Middle East where Iran is as powerful as Israel. So Israel has to be weaker. Iran has to get nukes. It's absolute insanity.
Now, Mark, you're known as the Great One by Rush Limbaugh. I can still hear him, his voice saying it in my head. So how do you think he would describe what's going on right now in the country, this election cycle that we have right now?
I think he'd be appalled, and I think he'd be having a blast with it, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he'd be slicing and dicing Kamala Harris in 1,000 different ways, as only he could. But I think he'd be very, very worried about this country. Now, he was a big optimist that Americans will always come out on top. And I like to think that a lot will depend on this election. But he also knew enough to know that we'd be in terribly grave danger right now. And so I think Rush would be, he always loved Trump. In fact, there's similarities between the two. You know, they're both kind of, they're like not counterculture, but counter ruling class, counter what people expect of them. They dance to their own music. And I think that was what Rush saw in Trump, and Trump sees in Rush, and they became very, very close and very, very good friends. So I think he'd be 100% in for Trump. He'd be furious with these Republicans who are trying to undermine Trump. He'd be pounding away on the Democrats and the Marxists and all the rest. He'd probably do what I'm doing, but probably with a little more sense of humor, to be perfectly honest with you.
Mark, one thing we've been talking about here is that right now, as we speak, these last few days, we look around and think, wow, this looks pretty good. This looks like a pretty good path to victory in this election. But at the same time, I think everyone's thinking the same thing. What the hell is going to happen in the next few weeks, given what we've experienced over the last few years? What do you think is going to happen?
You know, it's funny. When I meet people, they'll say to me, who's going to win? And I said, will it make you happy if I tell you we're going to win? Because how do I know? That said, what I try to tell people also is this. When George Patton was racing to the Battle of the Bulge to try and save our soldiers and the British soldiers and so forth and so on, if somebody came up to him and said, do you think you'll get there in time? He'd probably say something like, what are you talking about? I'm focused on the mission. Let's get the mission done. I'm not sitting here wondering if we're going to get there in time. So my answer to people is, have you voted early? You're going to vote early? You're going to get other people to vote? You're going to get family members and colleagues and coworkers to vote? Because that's how we win. If I tell you what I think, it really doesn't matter. That's why I think I'm one of the few people left. I don't go over all these polls. I remember the 2022, the polls showed we were going to blow them out. I find in many ways it causes two things, these polls. Depending if they go up 1/10 of a point or down 1/10 of a point, people get very, very down and dispirited and worried. If they go up, people get a little cocky. Some of our friends in the media, TV, radio, they do exactly that. So what is the point? For instance, what did the polls say 3 weeks ago about Arizona? How the hell do I know? And why the hell do I care? To be perfectly honest about it, it's going to be a close election. All these elections are close now, and we have an opportunity to win. They have a horrific candidate, somebody who is illiterate in every respect, somebody who's pretty stupid. She's an extremist. She doesn't know how to run a campaign. We have somebody who is strong, who loves his country, who's clear about where he stands on the issues. And so it's really up to us in our own capacity to vote early. Then it's up to us to be the Paul Reveres and to be the Thomas Paines and to do something a little bit more than we usually do. We're going to rely on the RNC or rely on a PAC or rely on somebody else to turn out the vote. No, we rely on ourselves, just like they did at the founding of this country. There's tens of millions of us. To sit passively or to acquiesce is ridiculous. So there are little things we can do. You know, we're not going in harm's way. Our bodies are going to be fine. Just do a few little more things than you would normally do. Bank your vote and then go out and make sure one or two other people vote. We all use our cell phones. I mean, it's not that big a deal, but we have to make sure that we do it.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better myself. Mark, thanks so much for the time tonight.
You guys are great. It's a great honor. God bless.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it's exactly what we're saying, right? We can have some optimism. That's fine, because I'd rather be optimistic than pessimistic.
Yeah.
But still, you have to go out there and execute the game plan.
Yeah, very simple, but straightforward advice right there, which is if everyone just goes out and gets a few people and makes sure that they go out and vote, you're doing your part. You're doing more than your part. And that is simple, but it needs to happen en masse.
Make sure that those numbers rise exponentially, and the math gets so much easier. When we come back, Kamala Harris might have to throw Joe Biden under the bus to save her campaign. Chris Bedford will explain next. Well, you don't have to wait until November 5th to vote. You can make your vote count every single day with your own dollar. At goodranchers.com, you can make a powerful choice to vote for American meat, support American agriculture, and make your voice heard for transparency in our food. Good Ranchers sources all of their meat from American farms, which not only supports local ranchers, but it also ensures that you receive the high-quality American-raised meat with no antibiotics, none of the seed oils or the hormones added ever. So by shopping from goodranchers.com, you're making a statement about the kind of values that you stand for. It's hard work, dedication to the American tradition. And right now, Good Ranchers is having their presidential promo. So for a limited time, you can get a free add-on for a whole 4 years until the next election. And that means that when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want extra plain chicken breast, Angus ground beef, apple smoke with bacon, or wild-caught salmon in your order for 4 years. And it's the best way to ensure that you have high-quality American meat in your kitchen. And to make it even better, every cut is pre-trimmed and individually packed. It's all vacuum sealed, and it makes your life easier. There's no more messy meal prep, no wasted food because of freezer burn or poor storage packaging. Good Ranchers helps you get the most flavor and value out of every ounce of meat that you buy, and that means so much in this economy. So don't miss out. Use my code Jill to claim this presidential promo worth over $1,200 and claim $25 off your first box plus free express shipping, and bring 100% American meat to your family meals until 2028. It's goodranchers.com, code Jill. Goodranchers.com, American meat delivered. If you watched our show yesterday, you already knew that Chris Bedford in his latest Beltway brief was going to write that Kamala Harris is on a collision course with none other than President Joe Biden. He joins us now to discuss. So Bedford, I mean, come on, let's dive into this. Why do you think that Joe Biden is the obstacle for Kamala to overcome?
Take a look at it. Take a look at the last 2 weeks now, as of today, that she's been on this media blitz. Her goal here was to reach voters who hadn't yet been persuaded, which is not a great place to be, by the way, as a campaign in the last 2 weeks. And this is some of the that's the subject of my Monday Beltway brief. But the most viral moments that have come out of this, some of the most damaging moments for her, have been repeatedly how she is unable or unwilling to differentiate what she would do as president from what Joe Biden has done as president. Now, the whole point of replacing Joe Biden wasn't simply that he was old and that he was aged and that he was out of it, but he was also, and this is the main reason, losing in the polls. He was essentially kind of where she is right now in a lot of these different states. She, however, is unable to overcome that last obstacle. Now, maybe part of that's because the Democrats made a deal with the Bidens that if you're going to continue the administration, if you're going to use the money that was raised for the campaign, if you're going to shunt Joe Biden aside, yet again, remember this happened to him in 2016, and replace him with someone else, then you can't at least attack the man who's devoted his life to the Democrat Party at the expense of basically every single belief and principle he ever supposedly held. But this has become a stumbling block now. Repeatedly, and the last time was on Bret Baier's interview, she just can't come up with some of the obvious ways that she would want to change his administration. And the reality is that she was behind almost all of these moves, or not the driving force, but a supporter of them. But if you're trying to win a national election in 2024, you've got to be able to say, I would have done the border differently and will do the border differently, even though she was the border czar, of course. You've got to be able to differentiate yourself from some of the spending, some of the inflation. You can't run as some kind of outsider candidate if you're incapable of criticizing the actual ruling regime because you're a part of it. This, I think, is setting her up for a collision course. They're basically throwing spaghetti at the wall at this point. There's no reason that they would go on to Bret Baier's show when she's as bad as she is at this. This is not coming from a place of confidence. No way they would do that if they weren't really worried about some of the numbers that they're seeing in their internal polling. And eventually it's going to come down to a time where she just has to differentiate herself or go down tied to the ship.
Okay, Chris, so let's say that she does betray Biden and disavows in some fashion. What effect do you think that has?
Well, that's, I think, the only thing that's holding them back is that Joe Biden is a little bit of a wild card right now. I mean, this is a guy who's been in politics for as long as Kamala Harris has been alive. This is a guy who has devoted his life to the party. He's changed his position on abortion. He's changed his position on crime. He's changed his position all the way down the board in order to please the party. He served nobly and duly as a vice president to Barack Obama, and then was pushed aside and disrespected by Obama in 2016 when they decided it was time for her to run. Well, he saw her lose, and then he came back without any support. If you remember, the support didn't coalesce around him until South Carolina. In Iowa and New Hampshire, he was out there flailing on his own. I would go to his rallies. He was either whispering the way he does now, even worse, or hoarsely yelling into the microphone. There were no big Democratic poobahs there behind him. It wasn't until South Carolina when Jim Clyburn backed him and the Democratic kind of coalition, the Democratic leaders decided, well, this guy's less crazy than the other candidates. We have to push him in front or we're going to end up with Bernie Sanders again. That was when they came behind him, and they quickly jettisoned him before his reelect. Joe Biden is furious. Joe Biden is angry. And if they push him aside, and while he's still alive, attack his legacy, there's no telling what he's going to do, what he's going to say. We've already talked about this a little bit in the show, is the low-level undermining that he's been doing to Kamala's campaign, the overshadowing, the sometimes second-guessing and talking over and saying, well, they're not exactly right about this or that thing. That could potentially get worse. I mean, it's an open secret. At last night's Al Smith dinner, you had Jim Gaffigan, a Democratic comedian, coming out and saying that there's all these different voters who don't want to admit that they're voting for Trump, but actually are. The Biden family. It was one of his great laugh lines of the night, and it actually rings true.
I love that. We're going to break down that dinner a little bit later in the show for everyone watching. But I want to get to you because Kamala, she's not even the only one ditching Joe Biden right now. Let's take a look at a bit of Senator Bob Casey's latest campaign ad.
Casey bucked Biden to protect fracking, and he sided with Trump to end NAFTA and put tariffs on China to stop them from cheating.
Okay, let's repeat that for a second. It says he bucked Biden and sided with Trump. So what does this tell us about Pennsylvania's latest political pulse right now?
Just a short aside first. Bob Casey is among the most disappointing politicians in the entire United States. His father, who was governor of Pennsylvania, was kind of someone who encapsulated what Donald Trump has become for the GOP. He was a Democrat, pro-union, pro-labor, pro-working class, hardcore Catholic who broke with the party all the time on protecting life and other things that were so important. And for that, he was pushed aside eventually, and his son has basically betrayed all of that. And now it looks like, well, his son needs Donald Trump because he's looking around, and this has been wild to see the tea leaves that are being read and the internals that are being read by Democrats running for office, statewide office in Pennsylvania. And also we saw today in Wisconsin, where Donald Trump starts to appear, looking good with the Democrats standing near them, signing bills. They're trying to say, after years of attacking anyone who dared support Donald Trump as a racist and a bigot and a conspiracy theorist, now they're trying to say, hey, I'm standing with this guy. My gosh, if you are Kamala Harris, you are in trouble in those states. And we've been talking a lot also on this show about how Pennsylvania is a dangerous state for Republicans. While they may be ahead in Georgia, they may be ahead in North Carolina, they're ahead in a lot of these states that they're looking at. Pennsylvania is the must win. So to see the Democratic Senate candidate tying himself to Donald Trump and attacking Kamala Harris, well, that's more meaningful than any public polling that's available.
Chris, quickly, I want to get your take before we wrap this on early voting. For instance, you see headlines saying in North Carolina, there's been a lot of it. Despite the hurricane, people are getting out to vote. I wonder what you think about that and anything else you're hearing about early voting out there.
Well, it confirms Jill's own reporting from the ground. When I called her and said, are people going to vote? Are they motivated? She talked about people being rescued, coming out and saying, where can I cast my ballot? Maybe they'd lost track. There wasn't election day yet. But that was a serious motivator for people. And it's been something I've been a little concerned about, looking at the fact that there are still bridges down. I mean, very sadly, they're still recovering bodies. More bodies will be recovered before this is over. A lot of deaths haven't even been confirmed yet, but they're starting to find them, and they're finding them daily. This level of devastation, but the people still have a little bit of politics in mind, and they are keeping track of the people who are helping them and the people that they're angry at. And the Republicans seem pretty eager. And if you're looking at some of the early voting and the party registration, not just in Florida, which we've talked about, but in places like New Hampshire and places like Pennsylvania, the numbers are up. I think the latest statistics is that Democrats would need, they want a firewall. You always want, if you're a Democrat in Pennsylvania, to have a certain number of votes who have been already cast for the Democrats before Election Day, because Republicans outperform on Election Day. In past elections, that number in Pennsylvania is Democrats want to be comfortably leading by about 230 to 250,000 votes before Election Day even begins. Based on how well Republicans have been doing in Pennsylvania, that number needs to be more like 500,000 votes in order to stay ahead. But the conspiratorial side, and I'm hearing this from some pretty reputable people in D.C. over and over again, is the constant worry about places like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, where they know that Democrats and the machines, which are very good at laundering votes in places like that, may be holding back some of their ballots to try and see just how much they need. Now, I've not yet confirmed that evidence, but from my reporting in 2020 in Philadelphia and the days after, these machines can be pretty effective at finding votes when they need to, getting at the people they need to, when they need to, making sure those boxes are checked and those ballots counted. It's an extremely organized thing. But even those machines working full time, and those machines are starting to fall apart these days, by the way, because of woke politics taking out the old unions and the old organization, even those would not be able to overcome a big enough wave from Republican voters.
It's a different year. It's the same game, Bedford. And we'll just keep going on because that's all we can do. But hey, thanks so much for your time.
I'll see you Monday.
When we come back, how do we stop robots from wiping out humanity? BlazeTV host James Poulos will have an answer. Stay tuned. Will every home soon have its own personal robot? That's what the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, reportedly wants. And BlazeTV host James Poulos wrote about it for Blaze News, explaining how we can ensure the robots don't kill us all. He joins us now to explain this. But first of all, James, as a child of the 80s, I was told by the Jetsons this is what we were supposed to have happen. So now let's take it into a more practical matter. Is this going to be a positive or negative technological development?
Yeah, well, it's all up to us, isn't it? I mean, the responsibility is on our shoulders. These things they're being sold as it can be whatever you want. It can be your friend, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. They didn't say it could be your priest, but this is the direction that things are going in. You know, people are confused in this world. They're looking around for answers, for spiritual authority, and many of them are turning to the machines themselves. So, you know, from my standpoint, we could end it all right now. We could all just, walk off the cliff into the ocean, end humanity as we know it. We can do it using the ocean or fire or robots or nukes or, it's always there. The opportunity to wipe out the human race is always there. Or we could take another path, one where we're in charge of the robots and we make sure that they only do a select set of skills and that we don't use them to replace human beings.
So talk a little bit about how you think Christianity plays into this and religion plays into it, because certainly a lot of people would say, well, that's true. You're right. And we should use technology for good. But I don't need a religion, and religion isn't going to play into it because technology will just lead to a increasingly, godless technocratic state.
Well, yeah, I mean, if that's what you want, that's an easy way to get there. But it never seems to turn out quite as well as advertised. Maybe that's just the curse of marketing, is that you got to oversell in order to get people to buy it all. I don't know. But when it comes to Christianity, I mean, look, there are other religions in this world, of course, and they're all sort of wrestling with how to figure out what to tell people to do with technology or what not to do. But here in the U.S., it's still the largest, sort of oldest religion in the country, and the decisions that Christians are going to make are going to be more influential in that respect. And there's disagreement, of course, always. But when you boil it down, you got to look at the human being as a sacred thing, body and soul. We've been given this body, we've been given our souls, and if we fundamentally transform those things, who knows what we're going to be. I don't want to take those chances. I don't think other people want to either. And that's the comparison between us and the machines. So if we lose touch with the fact that we are created, then the things that we create, we're going to start confusing them with ourselves. And that seems to me to lead toward, bad news.
Well, Americans particularly love their comfort, right? Like we love the couch and college football. It's my jam. He's a big Bills fan over here. It's fine. Like we can have certain moments, but by and large, like Americans, I feel like are getting like lazier and lazier each year. Wouldn't this just continue on the path, and would Americans become like the absolute laziest things that we've ever seen on this planet if this happens?
It's a temptation. I mean, we're surrounded by temptations all the time. You know, at any moment we could all decide to do like horribly sinful and destructive things. Like that's the power of the freedom that we've been given as part of who we are as these created human beings. So yeah, there are always these temptations. And, you know, if you crack open your Bible, you see, you know, if you don't like what the left eye is seeing, then pluck it out. And if you don't like what the left hand is doing, then cut it off. That's a dramatic way of making sure that you don't give in to temptation. I don't know if we're going to do that with robots, but hey, if we want to have nice things, if we want to create cool new stuff and put them to use, we got to make sure that we're doing it for our benefit and not just for our pleasure, but for things that actually strengthen and preserve who we are created to be.
So is the answer to how we make sure they don't kill us that we don't worship them and they serve us?
That's a good start because, you know, we might be the next sacrifice to the robot gods if we're not too careful.
Now, we've been talking about Elon Musk, right? Because this is him leading this charge. He's all over the place, though, right now. He was recently posting on X about the election, that if Kamala wins, that this could be the last election because what the Democrats want is they're going to give the citizenship to all of the illegals and try and turn every state blue. So do you agree with him? I mean, that looks to be what they want to do right now.
Right now is a moment when it looks like the momentum is seeming to be shifting over to Trump and the super friends. So it's hard to say. You know, events can obviously change very quickly. I think we're still sort of supposed to have at least 2 or 3 more assassination attempts, depending on who's counting.
Yeah, the calendar.
Yeah, according to the calendar, it's like the evil advent calendar of politics. But sure, yeah, I mean, democracy is in crisis right now. The people who are screaming the loudest about our democracy seem to be the ones who are most interested in turning it into just a figment of your imagination while something more pernicious happens below the surface. So, you know, Elon's out there doing the most. And regardless of whether you think he's okay or terrible or great, I think everyone can see that he's out there doing the most. And that ought to inspire the rest of us, I think, at least in some respect, to ask of ourselves that question that Elon famously asked before the guillotine really started coming down at Twitter, which was, what have you done this week? Right? Look in the mirror, my fellow Americans, and ask yourself, what have you done this week?
It is indeed a great question. One of the things that is going to happen that the EU is doing, and people are talking about this week, is coming after Elon. And, you know, as the headlines say, they even want to go after revenue from his other businesses in order to shut down X. And it's interesting. I mean, he's the one saying things like, this will be the last election. I mean, he's saying things that sound like the radical right, as they'd be called by mainstream and legacy media platforms. And they're coming after him in this way, and this seems to be heightening. What are your thoughts about that?
I think a couple of different things at work. You know, the Europeans know that they're not going to out-innovate America, so what they can do is out-regulate you. And maybe we're not the ones who create the things, but we are the ones who are best for telling you what you can and cannot do with them. So there's a kind of conceptual play going on there. Some of it is, I think, sour grapes is sort of like an army of bureaucrats going like, oh, you can't just do things. Like, no, we will tell you whether you can. So that's going on too. But you know, look, there's a quest out there for a spiritual authority that people can trust when it comes to understanding how to live with the technology that we have created. Out in Europe, you've got the Vatican. They want to have a say in some of that. You got these bureaucrats who, you know, they think they've sort of transcended all history and all politics, sort of end of history types. They think that they are the real spiritual authority, even though they present it in secular terms. And then we got, you know, the world's religions sort of grappling with this too. So there have to be some answers to those questions, because if there aren't any answers, then it's just going to be, well, I guess we have to worship the technology itself. And people are still pretty reluctant to do that.
So on that, why do you think it is? Because it certainly, I think this is something we both recognize. Why is it that people who take their faith seriously, right, Christians who take their faith seriously, have ignored this question? I mean, they almost regard like technology, I guess that's an issue. I don't know, it's sort of tangential to a lot of other things. Now I think everyone is being forced to think about it. But what's prevented, you know, conservative or traditional Christianity from really taking this question of technology seriously?
You know, I might go out on a limb and say embarrassment. Like you go back to Golden Age America, the space age, and, you know, Apollo what was it, Apollo 13, where they dump all the crap out on the table and they build this jerry-rigged thing.
You have however many hours to take these square things and make them fit into this round hole. I remember that
exactly
well.
right. Okay, and so that was a moment when a lot of just sort of like middle American Christians sort of felt like they could put their hands on the machines and figure it out. And then somehow something changed, and now a lot of those people, or their children, or maybe even their grandchildren, they can't seem to get the phone out of their hands, but they really don't feel like they have any competence or level of sophistication. They don't trust themselves to get under the hood and really get in there with the technology. And I think that's very embarrassing and sort of spiritually painful. And I think a lot of people have kind of recoiled because they don't want to expose themselves to that feeling of having to start over. Well, guess what? If you do go back and read the best of the spiritual authorities, the lives of the saints, or whatever you want, there's plenty to choose from. Your spiritual progress, your growth, is all about knowing that you are in all likelihood going to be falling down on a regular basis, and you're going to have to pick yourself back up with humility and patience and begin the hard work and the labor all over again. So I think that's going to have to happen with Christians and technology, and I think that's actually probably for the best at the end of the day.
I think we're about 18 days away from Election Day right now, so I have to get your take on what you think, because as we've been saying, this is the period of relative calm right now before the storm. What do you think we have ahead in the next 2 weeks or so?
Well, I was talking to Henry Olsen for an episode of 0 Hour that will be coming out soon on a laptop near you. And he's like a poll analyst. And basically what he said is like, day to day, it's really hard to tell. But if you zoom out, it does seem like, yes, even though by the points, Harris and Trump are pretty close, so it seems neck and neck. It's true that the internals for Harris seem pretty bad. The campaign does seem to be panicking. But don't get too cocky if you're on the right, because it's better to panic prematurely than it is to panic too late.
Do you think there'd be any black swan events? One thing that we've been asking is, it's too calm right now, and it feels like there'll be like 2 or 3 crazy things that have to happen between now and Election Day, just given the rhythm of life that we've all experienced the last few years. But maybe not. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. It is possible that we've sort of seen it all so far. I mean, RFK might chainsaw the head of a shark off at some point over the next couple of weeks. I don't know. But in terms of a real black swan event, I think I don't want to stick my neck out on this one, because it's a sort of old Greek DNA telling me not to jinx it. Don't say the thing, and then if it happens,
that's why
it really
is the
bad.
black swan, because you don't know what it's going to be either, right? Like it could be so many things. All of the fiction writers out there right now are going, I don't know. All the things that are actually happening in the world right now
there's a concept,
are too real that we can't even come up with anything.
Maybe I'll answer it this way. There's a concept called the Black Lake, and that's like, don't look for the single event, but look at what's going on with the environment, and the environment might all go to doo-doo before you realize what's going on. So check out your environment.
There you go. We'll end it on that note. I like that. James, thanks so much for coming in today. When we come back, we'll have Donald Trump's comedic highlight reel from last night. Don't go anywhere. Last night, Donald Trump delivered a speech at the Al Smith charity dinner, and he did not hold back on the Harris campaign. Take a listen to this.
There's a group called White Dudes for Harris. Have you seen this? White Dudes for Harris. Anybody know? Are some of you here? White Dudes for Harris? Doesn't sound like it. But I'm not worried about them at all, because their wives and their wives' lovers are all voting for me. Every one of those people is voting for me.
Here to discuss is Blaze Media digital strategist Logan Hall. And Logan, can anybody that is not Donald Trump deliver those remarks and get away with it?
I don't think so. No. We are witnessing what many call the GOAT. He is the greatest president of my lifetime, but he's also probably one of America's funniest comedians. I mean, he's up there, and it's amazing that he's able to do this. But as you know, he kind of worked in show business for 30 years, so he gets this. But I think it was probably wise for Kamala not to show up, because you just are not going to win against him in that situation.
Yeah, do you think that factored into her decision not to go? I haven't heard anyone say that yet. Maybe she just knew that she would be outperformed by the master. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that probably did. I know that she put out that weird. It was a bizarre video.
Oh.
I don't know what you know that video that
Yeah.
It was a very bizarre
With
video.
Molly Shannon.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I don't know what the thinking was there. I don't know if the campaign's just giving up, but I think they did know that she was going to be out.
But in the video, to be fair, they could obviously pre-record it and do as many takes as necessary to get it to where she thought she was going to have that comedic effect. But I think that what this is saying is she doesn't trust herself to be there doing this live.
Yeah, I mean, you can only put so much lipstick on a pig. Maybe that was the best take that they got.
Yeah.
I mean, if it is, that's a pretty sad commentary on her and her campaign. But
I have her campaign's response. They had a very weirdly worded response after they were getting some heat on social media. They said Donald Trump, and this is her talking point lately, is Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. He's struggling. So Donald Trump struggled to read scripted notes written by his handlers, repeatedly complaining that he couldn't use a teleprompter. He stumbled over his words, lashed out when the crowd wouldn't laugh at him. The rare moments that he was off script, he went on long, incomprehensible rants and reminding America how unstable he's become. I don't know that that's at all what I saw.
no, I think they're just throwing anything at the wall at this point and seeing what sticks. Obviously, she's a disaster whenever they put her up in front of people unscripted. I mean, everyone saw that Fox News debate. It was so bad. And I think the more that they do that, the more you're going to see her. The problem for the campaign is the more they put her out there to talk, the more that people dislike her. But they're kind of stuck now. So I know Bedford's talked about this on the show multiple times before that. They're kind of in between a rock and a hard place because they want her to get out there because nobody knows about what she is. But the more they put her out there, the worse she looks. So it's a very tough scenario.
What struck me about last night was that, Trump, he made mention of the fact there wasn't a teleprompter. He thought there wouldn't be a teleprompter, right? And there was one, and he didn't have the ability to use it. And he did read his lines. Like a lot of times he was just looking down, reading his lines, but he was still hilarious.
The delivery was still on point.
Yes, because he's still able to deliver, and he's always been a star, really, in the public eye, and he knows how to do it. So
it's also important to remember that he was up there surrounded by many enemies. I mean, those people are not his friends.
Yeah.
And some of them, they looked awkward at times, but they ended up giving him a standing ovation.
Yeah, he was sitting next to Chuck Schumer. Let's listen to one of those clips from Donald Trump.
Coming in very, very strong a certain way. I won't tell you what way that is, but Chuck Schumer is here looking very glum. Doesn't he look glum? He looks glum. But look on the bright side, Chuck, considering how woke your party has become. If Kamala loses, you still have a chance to become the first woman president.
Logan, when I watch that, right, it's one of the things where, okay, you're going to have a night where the left is going to make fun of the right is going to make fun of the left, but it's a great time for everyone.
Yeah, and I think this is the important thing to remember about Trump is that he is the unity candidate. And so much, they always talk about how much he's divided the country and how much his rhetoric has really lessened the national conversation or lowered the national conversation. It's just not true. He's the one who is participating in these great American traditions. This is something that he feels obligated to go to, even though he knows a lot of these people hate him and do not support him. And he goes anyway, and he shows up because he feels that that's something that he should do out of respect for the country and out of respect for these traditions, and Kamala was noticeably absent from it.
One of the people that we know that hates him is comedian Jim Gaffigan, and he was there that night delivering the remarks as well. So let's take a listen to what Gaffigan had to say.
The media has begun discussing the phenomena of secret Trump voters. I don't know if you've heard about this. People who publicly say they would never vote for Trump, but then when they go in the voting booth, they do. It's a small group. They're called the Biden family.
And I laugh because Gaffigan has, again, he's very publicly anti-Trump, and yet you have him there delivering remarks like this.
No, I mean, look, Gaffigan, who a lot of us used to like, right?
Yeah.
He's terrible on political stuff, but he did, you know, kind of throw some bones both ways, and I thought that was very interesting that he was comfortable doing that. And it was also interesting in that clip how hard the crowd was laughing, right? Because they all knew it to be true, and they thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, there were definitely some good barbs at Biden last night. Those were some of the funniest, in my opinion. I think for the media and these elites and a lot of the Democrats that were there, they are reaching the acceptance stage of grief. And they kind of know that Kamala's a disaster. They're probably going to lose in 2024. And I think they're trying to make their peace with it, no matter how painful.
All right, Logan, you have to be like the most MAGA person in the entire building here at Blaze Media. So
I am a loyal patriot.
So where are you right now? Like you're saying you think that the Democrats are in the acceptance phase. Where are you at? What do you think is going to happen here?
I think we're going to win and make our country great again. I think it's all but in stone, essentially. I think Trump is going to win. Now, for House and Senate, who knows? I think Trump is a lot more popular than a lot of these other, lesser known Republicans. But we'll see. I think the country is in turmoil. Everything is so expensive and out of control that people are going to get Trump in there. And I think 2024. Now, Democrats might try to fortify it or steal it or rig it or whatever else. We'll see. But, Trump says too big to rig, and I think that's kind of where we're at right now. I've never seen energy like this before.
Too big to rig. Well, you heard it right here.
Too big to rig.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Make groceries affordable again. Logan, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
We'll be back to wrap up the week right after this. There's so much happened this week, and we look last night, though. The most fun, I think, definitely had to come with that Trump dinner, the Al Smith dinner. And we didn't even get to, like, Michael Bloomberg, Eric Adams. One of the lines that I really loved is when Trump was talking about, oh, Eric Adams, don't worry. I know they told us we have to leave here fairly soon because all of the illegals are coming in right now. They're being shipped in from Texas right now. But it is just a nice moment to just have a little bit of laughter, a little bit of optimism, and not think about what's about to happen in the next few weeks.
You have to credit to Trump for that, because this is a time in which it would make sense for him not to show up on a stage with a woman who is an attorney general who's attacking him and trying to put him in jail. And he shows up, the other side doesn't. I think that's very impressive. And it's a sense of, of largesse, that we're going to win and that I'm still going to do this. I'm still going to be the unity candidate, because these sorts of events, this is what's breaking down in America, right? The two sides it's not just politics and just, oh, you're for this party and that party. This is becoming existential. So for him to go there was an act of statesmanship. It was absolutely hilarious. And my favorite part, though, is watching the actual elites having to sit there and look out. So Bloomberg, man, that guy did not look like a happy camper or a happy person for most of the night. And the fact he's sitting there next to Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots, who's obviously a huge Trump fan, you could tell, while you're watching him, what he was thinking the entire time. And that was very interesting. They had two of the only billionaires who were for Trump, Woody and Kraft.
Well, and then Elon Musk, on any other night, he had a town hall last night in Pennsylvania. He said he's going to have several more. But any other night, if he wasn't going up against a Donald Trump comedic performance, we would have been sitting here talking about Elon and his message to all those voters in Pennsylvania, where he said, I haven't been politically active before, but I am now. And, you need the First Amendment, so you have the Second, and so on and so forth. He was just saying so many based talking points that everybody on the right would have been that would have been the entire show for the right.
No, the thing, exactly. And look, Elon is willing to say things that most Republicans in the Senate, the bad ones, aren't willing to say. And he'll say it right to the camera, and he means it. And he says it with authority because he's describing what he sees from his perch as one of the wealthiest people on earth who actually gets stuff done. So this is a game changer in a deep kind of cultural way. You see an alternative culture that's not the usual garbage, that's based around a new set of heroes, a new set of values. And that's big, because in elite society, you're not supposed to be for Trump. That's the hold they have. They're the ones who have done this, right? You're not allowed to be for one team. And that's bad. But Elon is breaking that down every day and actually going out to the people. It's amazing.
Now, Pennsylvania is one of the very big swing states. North Carolina is another. And we see now early voting in North Carolina shattering records. And when I was there were the stories of everybody said, we understand what they're going to try and do to us. And we will be sure that we make ourselves known, we get our votes out there, we will stand in line for however long. That was the message that we came out with when we were there in North Carolina.
Yeah, look, I mean, this election, everyone's going to vote. Even people who don't vote are going to vote. Even non-persons are going to vote. So I think that this is indicative of where we are right now. I think people do know what time it is. They do know that they have to go out and do this, and you see that happening throughout the country. Now, my one caution would be before people get too excited with victory, they still have to go out and vote and bring other people with them, right? But the caution here is that if it's all close in any state, right, we know what's going to happen. There are armies of lawyers and NGOs ready on the left to sue, to take action, and to fight every step of the way. So they're going to try to draw this out. If it's not too big to rig, right, this is going to become a protracted legal battle, and they'll do all the things that they said were bad before. They'll flip and they'll say, actually, we're being patriots by fighting the election.
Well, if you need one last thing to be excited about, at least in Wisconsin, the drop mailboxes are now around 78, where they were at 500 for the 2020 election. So hopefully we can get those numbers down all across the country, and especially in those battle states. So don't forget to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform. We'll be back on Monday to break it all down.